Well, we all remember the £1 billion bottle jobs last year, don't we? Where Gary Neville famously said that Chelsea were £1 billion bottle jobs after Liverpool's kids under Jurgen Klopp managed to beat them 1-0 in extra time. Well, it's been a year since then, which baffles my mind actually. But Liverpool have made it to yet another final, this time under Arne Slot, and after their incredible season, they haven't had the best week. Meanwhile, Dan Burn, having the week of his life. That man has just made the England squad under Thomas Tuchel. No one saw that coming. And he's just scored in a Wembley final. He must be ecstatic. It sucks a little bit for Liverpool. You have to admit they've had a brilliant season. This definitely doesn't define their season. They're going to win a league in a couple of months anyway, so they can't really be too upset. They did get knocked out of the Champions League against PSG also earlier this week. So I think maybe that did have an effect, being taken to 120 minutes in penalties against a top-class side and then coming away to a difficult team at Wembley in a cup final. It was always going to be a challenge, but you have to give Eddie Howe credit where credit is due. Newcastle were sensational. They were so good, and today we're going to have a quick look at the tactics that Eddie Howe used to help Newcastle dominate pretty much Liverpool in the final. Liverpool didn't even look like they were in the game for most of it. They just didn't look like they wanted it, and I think a lot of this game came down to characteristics more than the tactics. I mean, you look at the basics of footballs, like the duels, the shape, just your distances, the desire. That's everything you need before you can even start thinking about tactics. And today we clearly saw one team had more of that desire than the other, and that was certainly Newcastle. And we're going to take a look at the tactics of when Newcastle were defending, because even though they scored two, I think this was the most important thing. Their ability to defend compact and attack with such pace and precision was what won them the game, and they did dominate Liverpool, which is something we haven't seen in quite a long time, especially when you consider the fact they were missing Lewis Hall, they were missing Anthony Gordon. Eddie Howe got it spot on. So let's come into the tactics board, and you can see here Newcastle set up in a 4-3-3 and Liverpool in their 4-2-3-1, but obviously when it came to goal kicks we saw something slightly different. So let's pretend Liverpool have got a goal kick. They're playing it out from the back, and it starts with Kelleher. We see them drop into their 4-2-4 that we see quite a lot actually, or a 4-4-2, depends what you want to call it, where Szoboszlai attacks into the almost right striker position to create a front four, and then you have McAllister and Gravenberch as a double pivot. And what I think was really interesting was what Eddie Howe asked Newcastle to do to go man for man in a high press. So instead of Barnes as the left winger attaching himself to Jarell Quansah, he actually inverted onto Kone and Isak onto Van Dijk, Murphy onto Robertson, and Livramento pushed all the way up onto Jarell Quansah. So that left back was pushed up really high to cover off that full back, but it then meant that Dan Burn had to shift across. You obviously got Joelinton and Bruno, and then you've got Tonali and Fabian Schär, and then Trippier would attach to Trippier. So you can see in a high press here, they've gone man for man. Every Liverpool player has someone attached to them. Obviously except the goalkeeper, but that's then where you see one of the attacking two make their curved runs to cut off the centre-back. So, for example, Isak's made his curved run. Kelleher now can't play into Van Dijk, and he can't play long to Robertson because Murphy is going to win that. And what this resulted in was Liverpool ended up having to go long a lot. They would play the over-the-top ball direct towards Jota, towards Szoboszlai, to try and hold the ball up and then try and go from there. And we've seen them do this quite a lot this season, where they've been forced to go long, and they've been really effective at it, but they don't really have anyone up top that's going to hold onto that ball effectively. They don't have a real target man there. And similarly, what Newcastle then did was brilliant. They dropped into a 4-5-1 mid-block. So obviously that meant Dan Burn came back inside, Livramento dropped, Joelinton, Tonali, Bruno, Murphy, Barnes, and then Isak up top. They dropped into this shape, a 4-5-1, that prevented Liverpool any space in the central zones. And this is actually where you really wish you had someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold, who can pick the ball up in this space as it transitions into something more like this, and find the penetrative passes, find that over-the-top ball for Szoboszlai to run onto. But they didn't. They didn't have that today, and that did cost them. But similarly, the fact that Liverpool were forced to go long all the time, it meant that this was a game of winning your duels, and Liverpool were woeful at winning their duels today. I mean, as I said earlier, tactics means nothing if you can't do the basics right, and Liverpool were unable to get into the game. The first ball, they were not winning them as often as they should, and then the second balls, they barely won the second balls. Newcastle dominated, and this is where it goes back to the fact that it looked like Newcastle wanted it more. The characteristics of the players that they had out on the pitch today were just so much more determined, and I wonder if that's maybe because they've not won in such a long time in a major trophy, that they had that extra determination, whereas Liverpool maybe have already got the league secured. They're maybe on a bit more of a back foot. I don't know. But they didn't field a weaker team today. Apart from maybe Quansah at right back, you could say that's a very strong, probably the strongest possible Liverpool side. Obviously Alisson as well, but we get why he didn't start. But Newcastle and Eddie Howe set up perfectly. They were really compact in the middle of the pitch exactly for this reason. For the second balls, they had more physicality and they won it. And I want to really highlight Joelinton. Joelinton was absolutely sensational at winning his duels. He was brilliant, both in the air and on the ground. I honestly couldn't believe the performance. We saw him celebrating and screaming into the crowd when it was 0-0 because he made a brilliant tackle, and that's exactly what you want to see. It's that heart and that desire. Today he made 7 out of 9 ground duels. He made 2 out of 4 aerial duels, 2 clearances, 1 interceptions, 1 block shot, and made 3 successful tackles. He was brilliant. He was arguably the man of the match today, for me anyway. He was incredible. He won a lot of them duels that created so many opportunities for Newcastle. He was in a position where he would go forward and retreat perfectly as well. I mean, his ability to cover the ground in the midfield was sensational, and it was all to make sure he maintained that +1 in the defensive line and in the midfield, and I'll explain that a little bit in a moment. So if you look here, you can see the average positions of the first half of the match, and I want to really highlight the positions of Joelinton and Szoboszlai and how they are almost in a similar role actually, but for different purposes. Joelinton is almost deeper than you'd expect. He's touch tight to Dan Burn in that position, and that's so he could drop deep and maintain this +1. But also, Szoboszlai was not getting any time on the ball, and he was having to drop deeper to try and pick it up and progress forward. He was trying to be the one to transition, so he was dropping deep, pick up the ball and carry it forward, but it wasn't working. He could not get enough space and time on the ball in the attacking areas because Joelinton was so aggressive in going in for that ball. And it resulted in Szoboszlai almost becoming invisible in this game. He didn't really get involved, along with the likes of Salah as well. I mean, you think about how prolific he's been this season, probably the best player in the world at the moment, and he just didn't even get a chance in this game, and it was all because of these numerical advantages. Let's take a look at that. So, what I mean by this +1 advantage, there's both the defensive line and the left side of the pitch for Newcastle, where Joelinton was pivotal. So let's start with on the defensive line. In this situation, you can see in this part of the pitch, if I highlight this, it's a 4 versus 4. Liverpool have 4 attackers in Salah, Szoboszlai, Jota and Diaz, and Newcastle have 4 defenders in Livramento, Burns, Schär and Trippier. So you've got a 4 versus 4, you've got man for man. What you want in this situation is an extra man in the defensive line for Newcastle, so they always have that extra man advantage to maybe win the second ball, as we've discussed. And so what Joelinton was doing was, in this situation, if Szoboszlai was trying to make this run in between, or if Salah was trying to make this run, Joelinton was imperative. He would track back and cover these runs to the point where it then meant that Liverpool had no attacking threat. And I also think it was really interesting because of Dan Burns' 6'7" frame. Sometimes Joelinton would drop a bit deeper as Szoboszlai was going forward, maybe for a long ball, to allow Dan Burn to step up and win that header instead, to try and win that long ball. And I think that was crucial because it meant that you're winning them first balls constantly, because Joelinton drops into almost a centre-back position and Dan Burn's able to step up because he's more likely to win that header compared to Joelinton because he's so good in the air. And that's why we saw that on that average positions, Joelinton and Dan Burn were so close to each other. But similarly, Joelinton was imperative at making sure that they had a +1 on the left side of the pitch. So if we look in this section, oh, I've missed someone. If we look in this section of the pitch, you can see it's technically a 4 versus 4 here, but with Szoboszlai almost progressing onto Szoboszlai and Dan Burn also coming into the frame, you now have a 5 versus 4 on this side of the pitch unless Konate steps up, and at which point you've got all this space for Isak to attack, so he wouldn't do this. So you've pretty much got an overload on this side of the pitch as well, because Joelinton is adding in the numbers and Tonali can tuck inside and almost progress onto Gravenberch, and at this point Liverpool have nowhere to go, and so we just ended up seeing the ball. Say it was with, I don't even know where I put the ball. Say the ball was with Konsa, Barnes progresses up, he's got no passing option in this situation. So he's forced to go back to Konate, and then the ball recycles. And then as you shift over to this side and Tonali comes across, you've now got the same thing on this side of the pitch where Newcastle have a +1 advantage. And it was really helpful in making sure that, and this is why they won so many of these second balls, they always had that extra man to go and attack it. And it was so clever from Eddie Howe. I really liked what he did to set up this team with that 5-man midfield. I'm not a big fan of a 4-5-1 normally, but I think today it really won Newcastle the game. Now I really want to show this Joelinton effect. I really want to highlight how good I thought he was today, and I've got a few photos here that we're going to unpick. So we can see there's a little bit of a situational change in this position, because you've actually got Cher who stepped out over here. Actually, let me make that a bit thicker. Cher is over here. You've now got Murphy in the right back position and Trippier at right centre back. So you've got a bit of a shift. But they've still got the extra man in this situation, which is fine. That's what they're after. But as you can see, Tonali is all the way back here. Meanwhile, I think it's Luis Diaz here, who's got all this space to cover because he should be there. Tonali should be much deeper to prevent this run of Diaz. So if you see here, Mr. Joelinton, he has both got... Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. What am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, you can see he's covering two people here. He's both got to jump towards Diaz and he's got to cover off the run of Szoboszlai. He's a one-man midfield against two progressive Liverpool players. He's got to make sure that he covers them both, at least to help Tonali recover in time, or he has to just make a decision, and it has to be the right decision. We can see Van Dijk's progress with the ball over this side of the pitch, and he's going to play a lovely through ball in for Jota to run into. Here we go. So now we've got that 4-man Newcastle midfield with Cher recovering. Tonali is all the way over here. He's miles away. So as we see again, you've still got Joelinton who's kind of trying to cover both these two men. He's still trying to cover this ground, and Jota is in on goal over here, attacking this byline. He wants to get as close to the byline as possible and get a cut back where he can. He's waiting for the likes of these guys to run into the box. And that's exactly what they do. Let's move it forward. We can see Jota has got into this position here, and here we go. He's cut the ball back. He's waiting for Luis Diaz to run onto it because he had a 2 versus 1 in this situation. You've got 2 versus 1. It's simple. It's maths. But this is where Joelinton was imperative. Instead of holding on to his runner in Szoboszlai, he comes across to read the danger, and he just manages to nick in front of the ball, as we can see here, before Luis Diaz. He just gets a foot on there, clears it away for a corner, and Newcastle managed to defend this situation pretty well. But that's all because of Joelinton's determination to track back, to cover the space where needed, especially when they were lacking a man in that midfield zone. Again, he was brilliant. His touch map must have been incredible. I've not actually looked at it, but that would have been really interesting to see. I think he was sensational today. Really, really impressive. So now we get on to how did Newcastle attack when they did get the ball. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but the primary effect that we saw was on the left-hand side with Livramento and Barnes trying to get a numerical advantage against Jarell Quansah. Now, I'll be honest, sometimes Gravenberch did come into play as well, but let's give the ball to Joelinton for the second. The moment they won the ball back in this 4-5-1, you'd see Tonali and Bruno and Isak all pushing forward, almost trying to make them runs into the box, whilst the ball would quite often come out towards the left, towards Harvey Barnes, or to a rushing on Livramento, and they almost banked on the fact that they know Salah's less likely to track back than most other players would. Salah, as great as he is, he's got that superstar profile like Ronaldo, like Messi, where they're so good that you're almost tasked. Everyone else has to do an extra job to make up for the fact that he's probably not going to track back. And I'm not saying he didn't, but he wasn't the best at it because that's not really what he's best at. So as you can see then in this situation, especially with Isak sometimes causing trouble as well, or Joelinton getting up the pitch, you see Gravenberch has to track back. The ball will come out towards Livramento and he'd progress it up into this situation. And you can technically see here you've got a 2 versus 1 with your Newcastle players in Livramento and Barnes, and that's what you want. You want to go 2 versus 1 against your fullback. So instead Gravenberch would have to come across, which opened up all this space, which required Szoboszlai then to track back as much as he possibly could. but the link-up play between Livramento and Barnes was incredible. We'd see little moments where the little pass and the underlapping run would come, or Livramento would play a ball into this zone for Isak to come across onto, or Barnes to come inside, and then Livramento would do the overlapping run for Barnes to play him in, and Isak's making a run into the box ready for the cross. And this is actually how Newcastle's second goal came about. Let's take a look at it. So here we go. This is what I mentioned. We've had the ball come out wide in towards Livramento, who's rushed forward. Salah is nowhere to be seen. Szoboszlai is trying to track Tonali. Van Dijk's obviously picked up Isak over here, and you've got McAllister, who's almost a spare man in the midfield. And actually, Newcastle are 2 versus 3 down here, because you've got Konate, Gravenberch and Quansah all coming on to Livramento and Barnes. So it's how can Barnes and Livramento link up to attack the space when it becomes available, and it's what they did all game really effectively. So the ball's come into Livramento. Here he is, and you can see he's having a little look at Gravenberch. What's Gravenberch going to do? Good question. Well, he plays the simple pass into the feet of Harvey Barnes. But as you can see, Konate isn't going to come this way now because you've got Tonali coming in and Szoboszlai's lost him. Szoboszlai needs to be tracking back instead. He's not. So Konate can't drop deeper or come across because he's got to mark this run of Tonali, because otherwise Tonali is in. So effectively you're then left with the 2v2 here, but I want to zoom in here. This is Gravenberch here, and you can see he is pointing his arm, pretty much an indicator for Konate to track this run. You can see now that Livramento's played this pass, he's made an underlapping run the moment he's made the pass into this space. Gravenberch doesn't want to drop deep. He's asking Konate to come across, but Konate can't do it, and this is where the miscommunication leads to space opening up. Livramento makes this run in between, and you can see he's out wide, where he's, to be fair to him, he was brilliant as well today. Not only did he pocket Salah, but he did an incredible job of getting forward, getting crosses into the box, and in this moment, he crosses the ball with his left foot. Okay, it's a bit lucky. They win the duel here. Again, won another duel. Murphy beating Robertson. And it falls straight to Isak, who just whips it into that far bottom corner. Kelleher had no chance, and it was a lovely move. And it all started with that ball progressing on the left-hand side for Barnes and Livramento to link up. And that run of Tonali that wasn't tracked by Szoboszlai meant Konate can't drop deep. Gravenberch thought that Konate would, and then you're too late to the party. Livramento's got space and the ball. That's not what you want him to have. And it led to this fantastic opportunity for Isak to put them 2-0 up. And at that point, you're thinking game is done. But we mentioned earlier, Dan Burn was also sensational today. He was brilliant. And it was from them set-piece situations. I mean, I don't think we really expected Dan Burn to be the hero of today, yet he was. And fair play to him. You never expected it, but he's turned into a brilliant centre-back recently who can also play left-back, which you wouldn't really expect from someone 6'7". He's incredibly agile for someone his height. I'm not going to say he's the best. It's not like we're watching prime Eden Hazard here, but he has a lot more quality than what you'd expect from someone of his size. And so we're going to look at the set pieces. And I'll be honest, I think Liverpool were lucky to only concede one. If we have a look at the set piece setup from Liverpool, now this isn't the best photo actually, I've made this quite blurry, but you've got two. I would also like to point out, by the way, every Liverpool player is back in their own box. I think only 7 Newcastle players, or maybe even 6. I mean, you've got one here, 3, 4, 5, and Dan Burn at the back. So you've got 6 Newcastle players in the box against all 11 men of Liverpool. But Liverpool have set up with Van Dijk here and Konate here. They are the best aerial players, arguably in the league. They are brilliant at winning their headers. They are tall, they are powerful, they will win them headers. So Liverpool have put them on the edge of the 6-yard box to clear any balls that come into that zone. Interestingly, in the Premier League a lot, we've seen the opposition bundling themselves on the goalkeeper. Newcastle didn't do this. They didn't overload this area. And so actually in this zone of the pitch, I mean, you've got 2 zonal markers here, maybe even 3 in this situation. And Newcastle have 4 players. So you've almost let Liverpool have an extra man or 2 in this situation. You've got 2 zonal markers here who are doing nothing. I understand having one there, but when you've got someone here, I don't understand why you need another zonal one here. Personally, I don't think it makes too much sense. But as you can see, because of this setup, it means Dan Burn is at the back post unmarked. And with his 6'7" frame or whatever he is, he might not quite be 6'7", but my point stands. With the quality of Trippier, a ball can come into this situation at the far corner where Dan Burn has a free header. That's just something you can never allow. And that's what happened in this situation. You can see here, Salah's getting ready to attack that way. Diaz is getting ready to attack this way. They're getting ready to vacate the box. Dan Burn wins his header here against McAllister. And luckily, it just goes into the hands of Kelleher this time. Let's go to the next setup, though. And it's the same thing. You've got... What have we got? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Newcastle players in the box. Again, and all Liverpool players in the box. Who is the one marking Dan Burn here? It is none other than Alexis McAllister again. Now, Alexis McAllister is just doing the job that he's been told, but he's not aerially known for his strength. He's not brilliant at winning headers. That's not his job. He's a creator. He's not someone that should be marking someone the size of Dan Burn. And again, with the quality of Trippier, he's able to put on a lovely floated ball. I mean, it was a brilliant cross into the box towards Dan Burn. And again, you've got the situation with the front zonal markers. Van Dijk and Konate are here. You've got Quansah is blocking off Fabian Schär, who is probably the main aerial threat that they were actually targeting. You've got Quansah blocking him off there, and you've got Gravenberch blocking Joelinton off here. They are two very good aerial threats, so I understand why they put Quansah and Gravenberch on them with Konate and Van Dijk zonal. But again, Dan Burn back here, he's in so much space. He's just got a free header, and then after we progress it on, the ball comes in and he does a lovely little shimmy to the right. I think it's just the way he's read the flight of the ball, but he shimmies to the right and it actually sends McAllister back this way slightly, so that when the ball comes in, Dan Burn attacks in this direction. He is getting the jump ahead of McAllister as well as using his strength and height. It means McAllister has no chance. McAllister's almost been sent back, got to go forward, get up to the ball, all before Dan Burn, who's running onto it. It's impossible. You cannot expect McAllister to do this, and shock. Here we go. Dan Burn jumps, wins the header, and I mean, it's an incredible header. It just flies into this bottom corner over here. I don't know whether I expect Kelleher to be saving this. I don't think so, because he's blindsided, but take nothing away from the header. It was sensational. And the set pieces, I think Liverpool are actually lucky to get away with only conceding one. It should have been probably a lot more with the threat of Dan Burn. Second half, they didn't immediately change, but eventually you did see I think it was Konate or Quansah, someone did then start marking Dan Burn because they realised that they couldn't keep letting it happen. And Newcastle defended well. Obviously, they conceded late. Joelinton arguably should have been sent off. Yes, I'll hold my hands up to that, despite me raving how good he is. But they were able to hold on. That Chiesa goal was a good finish. Fair play to him. Kind of proved his quality, which he hasn't yet done at Liverpool. But it just was too little too late for Liverpool and Arne Slot. And Newcastle deservedly won this trophy, and I think they could be incredibly proud of themselves. The fans can be incredibly proud of this team. I know the league's not maybe gone as good as they'd hoped this season, but again, take nothing away from it. It was a really impressive performance. I think they deserved it more. As I said, I don't think Liverpool going 120 minutes against PSG, who almost dominated Liverpool as well, was really the best thing for them. That probably hasn't helped the situation, but I think the atmosphere of the Newcastle fans helped them through this game. The atmosphere, just watching it from the TV, was brilliant. That roar when the goals went in, you could feel it. It gave me goosebumps, and I don't like either team, but I just got goosebumps because of how much you could feel they wanted it, and they deserved it as well. So all of you Newcastle fans out there, congratulations. I bet you are elated. And I think Eddie Howe got it spot on today, and I'm glad he was able to celebrate at the end of it. He is a top manager, and I think with him, Newcastle have got plenty more trophies to win in the future. I think they've got so many on the horizon if he keeps performing how he does. He's only going to get better, and the squad's only going to get better as well. And it's a brilliant squad at that. It will be a shame if they lose Isak, though. I think that could be a costly loss if they do. But credit where it's due. Newcastle, you deserved it. Newcastle fans, let me know down below, how did you celebrate yesterday? And Liverpool fans, don't get too upset. You've won a Premier League. Don't complain too much. Most teams can't even say that. You've had a great season. But until next time, I'll see you very soon. Thanks for watching.